Today we're doing prawn, chili and lime linguine. Okay, so while the water's boiling, you want to measure out how much linguine you want. It doesn't look like a lot, about that much. Fill the water about this high, so I boiled my kettle in advance, it didn't boil this quickly. This is how you can tell the water's boiling, when it has bigger bubbles like this, and then you just want to put your spaghetti or linguine in. I forgot to add, but usually before the water boils, you might want to get a little bit of salt, like not a lot at all. No, a little bit more than that. About that much, and just sprinkle it in the water while you're boiling it. You want to make sure all of it's in, just like that. So you might want to like push it down with a fork and like make it sort of twist a little bit to fit your pan. Okay, now on a medium heat pan, so like that's a 4, lightly oiled olive oil, you're gonna add some of your prawns, well all of your prawns really, and I bought pre-cooked just to save time, so this is sort of reheating them, but if you're cooking the prawns, it'll be, you sort of lay them flat, like that, and then you cook them for around 1 to 2 minutes each side, or until they turn a nice pink. Once they're frying like this, and I realise now that you could, if you wanted a little bit more flavour maybe, you could even use butter instead of oil. It gives the prawns a really nice flavour. At this point you want to add some red pepper. I pre-chopped mine because these were also meant to be pizza toppings, but I realised I ran out. So whoops. And then you just want to sort of scatter them around. Maybe even break them up if you think they're too big. I think they are too big, but I'll deal with that later. There we go. That's all the red peppers. It's nice. I would add more if I could. I can't. At this point you would also add, if you feel like it, you can add a really finely diced red chilli and then stir that around and let it all sort of mix together. I don't like this to be spicy, so I'm not going to put the chilli in, but this is the point where you would put chilli in. So after a few minutes, when you're satisfied that things are beginning to heat up and they're all really well incorporated, if you didn't put in the chilli like I did, then this is your chance to add sweet chilli. Now this is something I discovered a while back, but it tastes a lot nicer. So I sort of turn the heat down, maybe to a 2, or even take it off the heat completely, and then add quite a lot of sweet chilli sauce.
Okay, in retrospect, when I said a lot of sweet chili sauce, I should have said a little bit of sweet chili sauce. I added too much, so please learn from my mistake and don't add that much.
Once you are sure your spaghetti is cooked by taking some out with a fork and testing it, drain it, give it a good old mix around there. And then you want to add it, while it's nice and hot, to your pan with the sweet chilli in, and it shouldn't be too hot that it sizzles or anything, and you just want to mix that around. Make sure your spaghetti's a little bit drier than this.
At this point you can definitely add some spinach or some frozen spinach, and if you have any wild garlic, now is a really good time to put it in. I didn't add garlic cloves earlier because I have some wild garlic, but you generally add that at the beginning.
And then add some freshly squeezed lime, of which I've definitely not run out. I mean, I definitely did, but so I'm going to add some lime drops, just a few here and there to give a little bit more flavour, and you're done. And then maybe add a little bit of basil on top. Now if I had a proper basil plant I would add this, but unfortunately I only have dried basil leaf, so after you give that a good mix around it should be just ready to go.
So when the pan was still hot, I did add the wild garlic, and here is the beautiful finished result. If you don't have any wild garlic, that's fine. It just adds a nicer flavour for the sweet chili.
Today we'll be making peanut butter and banana ice cream sandwiches. So once you've got your peanut butter, you want to add your 175 grams of golden castor sugar. And then a little pinch of salt, so that's about a quarter of a tablespoon, or a teaspoon even. No, tablespoon, definitely tablespoon. And then add your 75 grams of dark chocolate chunks, probably a little bit smaller than what I've cut, more like sort of that size, and not very thick. And then we'll mix it all with a wooden spoon. And then add 1 large room temperature egg and mix that really well. Then you want to grab them in sort of little tablespoon amounts and then pop them on your baking sheet in a nice ball. Maybe the size of like a cherry tomato. Okay, once you've put your cookies in the oven, it's time to make the ice cream. So you should have 3 frozen bananas chopped. I froze these last night. So get those in, and then 2 tablespoons of cream, double cream. 2 and a little bit extra because I like it creamy. And lastly, 1 teaspoon of vanilla extract. And then blend.
I had to keep stopping my blender and scraping down the sides and making sure it all blended, so don't be afraid if it doesn't blend straight away. And don't be afraid to put this in the freezer to set a bit. Okay, so you're just going to start off by deseeding your pepper, and that's by pushing down on the stem and then twisting it. If not all of it comes out, then cut into it, cut the first layer, and then gently work your knife almost like a circular shape to get the rest of the inside out, like that. Then you're just going to start chopping your pepper with your knuckles to the blade, and then you're going to not do up and down, sort of like I'm doing here, but just gently push the knife forward and down. Once you've done that, you're going to move on to some mushrooms. Gently cut them sort of in an up and down motion. I don't like using my knuckles to the blade for this because I find it too difficult. You can chop mushrooms sort of almost any way, as long as you don't cut yourself. Maybe be like slow and careful. And then here we've got a spring onion. So you can put your knuckles to the blade for this, but the edge of mine was really thin and I wanted to push it through because otherwise it wouldn't. I'm just using the same chopping board and the same knife because they're all vegetables. But generally you do sort of a little bit faster motion where the tip of the knife is on the board and then you're just lifting up the back bit like I'm doing here. Now that all the veggies are cut, you're going to add some tomato puree, sort of as much as you feel. I like to do a little squiggle motion. I'm just opening the cap here because there's the underside of the lid has a little pointy bit and you can use that to open the foil. I like to do a little squiggly motion, not too much and not too little, but just enough to sort of cover it. And then you're going to flatten it out with the back of a spoon because it's nice and easy that way. Now, if I can actually get the bag open, this is where you add your mozzarella and cheddar cheese mix. You can do just mozzarella, but I like mozzarella and cheese together. It tastes a lot nicer. And then you just, not too much cheese because you will be putting some on top of the vegetables, but just like a nice little layer, like a little bed for them to rest on. once you've made sure they're in place, it's time to add the vegetables in whatever order you want. I started with peppers. I probably should have started with the mushrooms because they're flat. But generally you can start with whatever you want as long as it doesn't become too much and then the pizza will sort of topple over. I also forgot to add that I chopped some olives because they weren't already chopped, but you can just get the already chopped ones to make it easier for you. But then just layer all the vegetables just as you like, because you're going to be the ones eating it. Make sure it's try and make it evenly spaced out so you don't get like peppers in one area and too many mushrooms in the other. Or if you like that sort of thing, you can absolutely do so. But we're going for a sort of like almost a medley mix here. Once you're done with that, just add a little gentle sprinkle of cheddar and mozzarella on top. This is another reason I like the cheddar because on top it tastes a lot better. I'm not sure how, it just does. Feel free to disagree with me, but I like it sort of brings a slightly more sour flavour, like that cheese flavour rather than just pure mozzarella. And then once you've done that, put it in the oven and basically when the cheese goes brown, it's ready.
Hi, today we're going to be making lemon cookies.
So here you're going to add the butter to the sugar. I put it in the microwave to melt it a little bit, but it's okay if it's not completely melted. You'd maybe want to have some of those slightly thicker bits of butter just to get a really nice texture. And then add 1 teaspoon of vanilla extract. Then add 1 large room temperature egg, and the room temperature is quite an important step. And then you want to add 1.5 tablespoons of bicarbonate of soda. So I'm using a half tablespoon measurement here, so I'm going to put 3 of those in. At this point you want to sieve your flour in. It might seem like a lot, but do like a little bit at a time, otherwise you might overload the mixture all at once. And then you want to fold that into the mixture so that you don't put too much air into it. So as you do this further on, your wrist might get a little bit sore, mine did. Feel free to take a break, you know, that dough's not really going anywhere. But I would save a couple of tablespoons of the flour so that when you add your lemon zest and lemon juice later on, the mixture isn't too watery. Now, you don't have to cut your lemon in half. I personally find it easier to grate, but that's just me. And then you want to add your zest from a whole lemon. So at this point you want to grab your sieve from earlier and juice over it so that it catches all the pulp and all the seeds. So as you can see here, the mixture is kind of watery, but you just want to try and fold that in again. It won't be as stiff because you're adding moisture, so it will get a lot more loose and it'll be a bit more watery. And that's why I recommended saving a few tablespoons of flour so that at the end of this, you'll see it becomes really watery, like not very cookie-like in texture. So you can add that plain flour and it makes it a lot easier to roll around your hands and make into a ball form. So here's where I probably should have reused the sieve, but I didn't. Luckily, there wasn't any lumps in the flour, but I just kept adding tablespoon until it felt like a proper cookie dough texture. I left mine a little bit softer, and because of that, the cookies ended up coming out more like a sponge, which I loved. I enjoyed that. So you can do that if you want to. But if you do want it a slightly more cookie and a slightly harder texture, I'd recommend putting maybe 5 or 3 tablespoons of flour in. And here you just want to grab like a tablespoon and roll them into sizes that you feel are gonna work for you. So I did something a little bit too big, as you can see on camera, but I was just rolling it around in my hands like a sort of ball of dough, and then popped it onto the baking sheet, and they'll go into the oven shortly. Once the cookies are cooling, you can start to make the glaze, and that's adding the lemon juice to the icing sugar and mix. Once you made the glaze, you can just sort of drizzle it all over. It's a little bit thick, so you can add a little bit more lemon juice if you like. I wouldn't, because it really alters the taste. I think 3 tablespoons is more than enough. If you use fresh pressed juice, it might not be as sour, but I didn't have any fresh left, so I had to use some from the bottle. But then just scatter it all around your cookies and then leave them to set for a few minutes.